Hi everyone, and welcome to How Our Garden Grows. In this episode, I want to cover some of the basic materials if you're thinking about seed starting yourself. Seed starting, you can save yourself a ton of money than going to the store in the spring and buying transplants. They can be quite expensive, $3, $4, $5 a transplant even, and depending on what you buy, where you go, and the numbers just add up. And I've got quite a few cells here set up. So this is a finished cell of different sowings, and I have different markers here. But there's a lot of things that you can do to get the right materials so that you can get started, even if it's your first time. So this is a great first time video for anyone. So what we're going to do, we're going to cover basic containers that you will need, such as these seed flats here. And we're also going to cover seed starting mix. We're going to cover watering, having a nice jug here, and also creative ways that you can label. And I use these popsicle sticks here if you can't tell. So it's a good way to kind of save a little bit of money. We're also going to cover lighting, the basics of lighting. So quite a few things that we're covering here, but I'm going to try to be very brief and basic so that you can start looking before the growing season starts, or I should say the seed starting season begins. All right, well, let's get started. So the first thing I want to cover is seed starting indoors can be kind of messy. We've got a lot of this peat moss and coco coir based medium here, and so take a look. I've just got an old towel on the corner over here of my table, and it just catches a lot of the dirt. It just can get a lot messy or around the house. You can always fold this out, shake it off outside, and then do some laundry afterwards and clean off the towel. So I really love using just a basic towel. You know, you can use other things like table coverings, whatever you want to use. Just use something is my recommendation because, again, it can get quite messy. So let's start with seed starting containers. And so as an example here, I'm going to choose a fresh tray, bring it around. You can see all the seed starting cells in here. And you can find these at any local nursery or garden center. Sometimes Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart will have seed cells like this. And so if I kind of pull this out, you've got a tray here. And this is important because when you're watering, and we'll talk about watering principles, you'll want to water from the bottom, but these seed cells here, and just take a look at the bottom here, they have holes in them. So what happens is the water is going to soak up into your starting mix, and you'll be able to keep your plants watered without necessarily having to splash seeds around. And it's also going to help prevent some early onset diseases that seed starts can ultimately get. So as you can see, I've broken up a couple of these. I do recommend breaking all of these up just because once you have full transplants grown, these aren't as perforated as you think that they are, and I end up ripping some seed cells every time. So I'd highly recommend just getting it done early and then putting them back together like such, putting it all back in. You should be good to go. Now let's just say you don't have access to a local nursery, a local greenhouse, or you're maybe a little bit more of a fan of being more self-sufficient, self-sustainable. I use styrofoam cups, and so you might be arguing with me instantly and saying that styrofoam is not good for the environment, which is correct. The good news about these is because they don't break down, you can reuse these, and I've done that a lot with a lot of plants. Take a look at these. These are all previously labeled, and I'm going to basically reuse all of these. So you can start a lot of, and a lot of times they do last better than, in my opinion, some of these seed cells here. that you're throwing away this plastic. So actually the styrofoam's a little bit more durable. What you're gonna wanna make sure that you do, and I'll show you an example here, is you wanna poke a good hole at the bottom, because what's gonna happen is you wanna make sure that there's adequate drainage. You don't want the container or the medium that you're growing in to fill up and pool with water. It is not going to be healthy for your plants to thrive and prosper. All right, so now we're gonna take a look at seed starting mix. And this I have in just a small tote, just a small kind of clear tote. And the reason why I do this is any type of mix that you typically buy, seed starting mix, it's not going to have a whole lot of moisture in it. So what I like to do is pour it all out of a bag and put it in a container just like this, and then water it in, then mix it up. And so you can see it's this stuff is already a little bit dry. I haven't watered it for a couple of days, so it's a little bit drier, but it's still pretty moist. You don't want it soaking wet. You want it to be something that again holds water, kind of like this, but then also is still loose and falls apart. Look at how fine this is. So a lot of these mixes, and I can show you if you want to make some of your own mix later, so that's more of a different video, but basically this is a combination of peat moss, really finely ground peat moss, coco coir, and vermiculite. Sometimes you'll see perlite in the mix too. That's the bigger white chunks that you might see. The smaller white chunks are vermiculite. And so what I use is Jiffy seed starting mix. And that's just the personal preference that I have if you're getting started. The reason why I choose Jiffy over some of the other brands is I think they create a finer material for what the cost is. They also seem to have a better sterilization of their product. They're not 100% perfect, but there are some smaller fungus gnat insects that are known to kind of invade your space. So this has been the most pure. There are other ways that you can treat it, say boiling, putting boiling water on your mix. I've seen that method done before. Freezing it doesn't really help a whole lot. But then there's some other techniques once you have them, such as cinnamon, a lot of different ways. But when you start out with a nice clean mix that is pretty much sterile and really nice and fine, I would highly recommend that brand if you're just getting started. And you can find that brand in a lot of places. I've seen all the big box stores pretty much carry that brand. All right, so now let's talk about lighting. Now lighting, there's a couple of main factors to look for. This is more of a shop light or a general use, mixed use light that does plug into the wall, so that's good. That's definitely something that you want. But you're really looking for a couple of different factors. Since we're just doing seed starts, you don't have to go online and spend hundreds of dollars on specialty grow lights or anything fancy like that, unless you want to. Unless you want to start growing full-size tomato plants and get tons of fruits inside, I would highly recommend that you just stick with some really basic types of setups like this. And so you can hang these on a shelf, you can mount these. I've done these on clothing racks before. So you are gonna have to do a little bit of logistics there, but once you have a small setup, I mean, this is a 4-foot light. So this'll get you started on a couple of basic seed flats. So because it spans so much there. So we're really just looking at a couple of different numbers here. So the first factor that we're looking at is the brightness, and you're going to find that factor in as lumens. So 3,200 lumens, that's perfect. And could be a little bit brighter if we wanted. I would highly recommend you need something at least 3,000 lumens. So the higher you go, the better. There's some really, really bright ones out there that go 5,000, 6,000, even 7,000 lumens. They're super, super bright. Technology is advancing very, very fast here. The brighter the light, the more close to mimicking the sun you're going to be with the amount of brightness. Plants need bright lights. I use the, I guess the saying of it's the surgeon lamp. So that's kind of the nickname I give what you're looking at. A lot of times we'll like very nice soft white lighting. You'll see things that are kind of more mimic incandescent lights. Something that's more comfortable on our eyes is not really good for plants. So definitely make sure 3000 lumens or higher. So this light is perfect. The other thing we want to look at is the color temperature here. And let me see if I can't get to it. Sorry about the movement. Color temperature says 5000 K, and the K stands for Kelvin. So Kelvin basically measures the color temperature. So this is all the different spectrums of light, right? And so this is anything 5000 Kelvin to 6500 Kelvin will mimic daylight. And sometimes you'll see the Kelvin rating. I think lights have done a way better job at putting the Kelvin rating actually on the packaging. Sometimes you won't see it though. So here's how you know. If you see the word, I'm gonna move over here. If you see the word daylight, daylight is exactly what you want. You don't want anything soft white or you know, any of the other sayings that you might see there. You want to look for daylight in particular. That's how you know you're going to be in that 5000K to 6500K range. So those are the two basic factors that you want for a grow light, and this is absolutely perfect. All right, so let's take a look at fertilization now. So here's what I use, and typically I would say I'm about 90-ish% organic. This is not an organic fertilizer. I only really just use this for seed starts because you don't really need that much. I mean, a bottle like this typically lasts me forever. What I use as an organic option is the fish fertilizer or fish emulsion. They both go by similar names. It's definitely a lower concentration. The problem with organics is, especially when I'm seed starting indoors, they tend to have more of an odor to them. And they're not super pleasant, though I can take it, but I just don't want that kind of smell around my house. Fish fertilizer will dissipate in a few days, so it's not the end of the world. And again, you're not overly fertilizing seed starts. We'll get a little bit more along that as we move forward. But really, you shouldn't be fertilizing, you know, very many times before the seeds actually get out into the garden. Otherwise, you're basically starting your seed starts too early at that point. So, but I like this. I do like this for very concentrated purposes. I do want to clarify that there's nothing wrong with the chemically produced fertilizers. The plants really don't know the difference. The main difference is there is a sediment that will build up in your soil over time if you overuse them, if you overconcentrate it. So we'll go over some more fertilizing basics in another video, but just to give you a couple of different options of what I use to fertilize. All right, so the last few things is make sure that you have a nice small watering jug. I like to have these small things throughout the house. I probably have like 4 of them just in different stations throughout my home, and they just work very well. The other thing that I brought up at the beginning of the video is these popsicle sticks. A lot of these companies can charge you a lot for a few labels, and I can buy hundreds of popsicle sticks for very little value, very little cost. So high value, very little cost, and they work really well. You just use any sort of pen or utensil to write on them. It is very important that you label your plants, so I'd highly recommend finding out some solution to label them. You will forget is the general rule. You might know what you're planting now, but it's really, really important, especially when you have similar like looking plants like tomato varieties and pepper varieties. They all look the same. So you might be able to tell the difference by some of the cool season crops, but these, some of the warm season vegetables, it's a little harder to tell. All right, and so that is all of the seed starting basics. I will link some of the recommendations that I have in the description for everyone to take a look at to make some purchases, and we'll get back to the more of these episodes. If you want to like, subscribe, and follow me, we'll go ahead and go through the whole course of how do I get something going like this, how do you seed start different types of vegetables, and we'll walk through it together. So please like and subscribe and check out my other YouTube videos. Thanks again for watching.